Hey, what's good? Not every fighter is gonna be a Hall of Famer. Not every fighter is gonna be an all-time great. Not every fighter is gonna be on pound for pound lists. It does not mean they're bums. It does not mean they suck, and it does not mean they should not be remembered. The fighter I'm gonna talk about today is Tommy Morrison, who was one of the best fighters in the 1990s, one of the best heavyweights actually in the 1990s. And I was surprised to see I was gonna do this video, and I was surprised to see all these comments in the comment sections of his fights of a lot of people calling him a bum, saying he has no heart, saying that he only got the spotlight because he was white, because he was a great white hope, and that does have a part truth in it because the media try to paint that, but Tommy never embraced that. Tommy never embraced that he would be the great white hope. He would reject that completely. Yes, he would say that he was all American, right? But he's from the Midwest. I think he's from Arkansas. He said he would say he was all American. He would say he's great grandnephew of John Wayne. So yes, he was trying to gain supporters from the white folk, but he would never call himself the great white hope. So that is not his fault. It's the media for painting him as such. But he did, maybe if you're saying he got undeserved attention for that, I will still argue with this because we got ourselves a fighter with the spectacular knockout percentage. We're talking about. Wait up, I'm doing the math right now, but this guy was knocking fools out bad. He has an 80% knockout ratio. 80%. Tommy Morrison could bang. Tommy Morrison was good. He could fight. Ask Razor Ruddock, ask George Foreman if he could fight or not, because he could. Just the fact that he came back, you wanna tout him for his losses, but just the fact that he came back from those losses that were so brutal should be a reason he should be admired. That loss against Ray Mercer, which he was winning, by the way, was brutal. I challenge any man alive or dead, any former fighter that could have taken those shots and got up. Tommy Morrison, that was one of the most brutal knockouts I have ever seen. It was brutal. Brutal. Just the fact that he came back from that should be something that people should admire him for. You know, he could have easily had retired because that fight was brutal. But no, he came back. People were saying he had no heart, but he fought Joe Hip. And Joe Hip is not a great heavyweight. But in this fight, you're going to say he has no heart? In this fight, Tommy Morrison suffered from a broken jaw and a broken hand. This fight was brutal. He had a brutal fight with Joe Hip. He dropped him in round 5, and then he dropped him for good in round 9. This guy would not go away. He's a tough Native American, but he had the heart to suffer from a broken jaw and a broken hand to survive that fight. He also beat Carl the Truth Williams, who looked very in shape and very motivated for this fight. You also want to say he had no heart? Watch this fight. He was down twice in the 5th round. He knew he was down on the scorecards, so he stopped him. Great fight. That's a great fight, an underrated fight, if you will. This fight catapulted him to the fight with George Foreman, which he beat by unanimous decision. He beat him clearly. You want to say, oh, George Foreman was 44 years old. Yeah, but you're not seeing bums beat him. The only guy that had beaten him since he came back was Evander Holyfield. You want to take away from Holyfield's victory? Because that was a spectacular fight, and he gave Holyfield the fight too. Actually, Tommy Morrison won more clearly on the scorecards than Evander Holyfield. If George Foreman sucked when he came back, why didn't Michael Moore beat him? Why didn't Alex Stewart beat him? Why didn't Coetzer beat him? It's because he was still showed signs of his greatness from the past. He was still a good fighter. You want to take away from his victory of beating George Foreman? Come on, that was a good win, and his best win. I'll admit it was his best win, but man, he was in line to unify the titles against Lennox Lewis. He was already, getting in line to make $8 million to fight Lennox Lewis. Then came Michael Bentt, who's the only not a good heavyweight, who's, the only mediocre heavyweight that beat him. Not the only mediocre heavyweight that, gave him troubles, but the only mediocre heavyweight that beat him. He knocked him out in the first round. He dropped him 3 times. And I'll just add that it was due to the 3 knockdown rule. He didn't look like he was too hurt. He got up like right away after each knockdown. But I'm not going to argue that he would have survived that round, but maybe he would have. He might have survived that round, might have come back and knocked him out the second round. He was not totally gone. But since the 3 knockdown rule, it's all right. Yeah, Michael Bentt was not a great heavyweight. Not in the league of Ray Mercer or Carly Truth Williams. But yeah, he lost his next fight against Herbie Hyde. He lost the title, and then he retired. So he was not a great heavyweight. He came back. These losses are big losses, like bad losses, and I'm sure they take like everything from a fighter. But he kept coming back. 1995, he fought a war. If you haven't seen this, go ahead and watch it. He fought a war with Razor Ruddock. And Razor Ruddock could bang. You want to argue that Tommy Morrison didn't have a jaw? All right, but he got hit with some big shots against Razor Ruddock. And he kept getting up. He got up. He got knocked out the first round, and then he got hit with some big shots. But he got up. He kept handling his shots. He hit him with a beautiful left hook. His best punch by far. One of the greatest left hooks you will ever see. He hit him with a beautiful hook that I do not know how he got up. The fight was later stopped. And Razor Ruddock is a guy who's underrated as well. He's a guy that probably gave Tyson his toughest fights. Those fights are brutal too. And which Tyson said, Razor Ruddock hits like a mule kicks. And Morrison said, yeah, he does hit like an effing mule. Then he fought Lennox Lewis right after that. And he got outclassed. He got outclassed by Lennox Lewis. Lennox Lewis fought a very determined and very disciplined fight. And he dropped him 4 times. And then the referee stopped him. Good stoppage. Morrison had no chance. This was his last fight before he got AIDS. Which is funny because he should not have fought after he got HIV. But he got HIV then later. Yeah. He got HIV. And then he fought the next year in a fight in Tokyo, which they don't care if you have AIDS or not. I'm going to say AIDS and HIV interchangeably, even though I know they're not the same thing. So he fought even though he had AIDS. And it's just a fun fact, I guess. In this fight, they were allowed to fight in Tokyo, but until if Tommy received a cut, his corner received a 1 minute. He received 1 minute to allow the cut to stop, to this corner to stop the cut. If it does not stop the cut, then it goes to the scorecard. So that's interesting. Then he came back 10 years later claiming he doesn't have AIDS. And yeah, he suffered from the AIDS denial. I'll talk about that later. But some fighters I didn't mention were he had a draw with Ross Purity, who was not a great heavyweight either. But I mentioned this only because Ross Purity knocked out Klitschko. He gave him the first loss. So Tommy Morrison didn't have the best chin, of course, but he didn't knock Tommy Morrison out, but he did knock Klitschko out. So there you go. He also beat Pinklin Thomas in his earlier fights, who's a former world champion, who beat Tim Witherspoon, Mike Weaver, and James Tillis. And Tommy Morrison beat Pinklin Thomas faster than Mike Tyson, faster than Holyfield, and faster than Riddick Bowe. And Trevor Berbick, which went the distance with Pinklin Thomas. He also beat Lorenzo Boyd, a Tyson victim as well, but he knocked him out the first round too. And Tyson fought. I mentioned this because Tyson fought Lorenzo Boyd in his 24th fight, and Tommy Morrison fought him in his 9th pro fight. So he was a veteran and he fought many good fighters. And Tommy Morrison had already fought him. He was the best fighter he fought at that time. Excuse me. He fought James Tillis. He beat him. He knocked out Tillis in the first round as well. Tillis went. Holyfield knocked out Tillis in the 5th round, and Tillis went the distance with Mike Tyson in a fight where it was the first fight Tyson had gone the distance, and it's one of Tyson's hardest fights. He said it was one of his hardest fights, in which at that time some people were even arguing that Tillis had won. Maybe it was because Tillis went the distance and he gave him some trouble, but yeah, Mike Tyson deserved the victory. But Tommy Morrison beat him in the first round. What's interesting is that all his losses came in fights that he had fought 5 times that year, and the losses were the last fights, and they were each in October. Tommy Morrison stayed busy. He turned pro in '88, fought 3 times. He debuted in November, guys. He fought 19 times in '89, 3 times in '90. In 1991, he fought 5 times, his 5th fight being with Ray Mercer. 1992, he fought 6 times. '93, he fought 5. 93, he fought 5 times. The 5th one being Michael Bennett. And he should have just not fought in that year after he beat George Foreman. But in '94, he fought 4 times. And in 1995, he fought 5 times, his 5th being against Lennox Lewis. So that was very interesting with me. He might have just burned himself out being that active at that time, because fighters are being that active, fighting 5 times a year. That's staying busy, man. Anyway, so he had a great career, fought some good fighters, won a major title, beat an all-time great, and beat a lot of very good fighters, and has one of the best knockout ratios I have seen, an 80% knockout ratio. So think twice before we're calling Tommy Morrison a bum, because Tommy Morrison is not a bum. He was a very good fighter and a hard puncher with one of the greatest left hooks and right uppercuts you will ever see. Tommy Morrison died in 2013 due to cardiac arrest, but they say that he died due to AIDS, which he had AIDS in 1996. So I'm saying I agree with that. But he was one of those AIDS denialists that, didn't believe that AIDS actually existed, or that HIV caused AIDS, that it was the medicine that made AIDS. But the reason that I say that it was AIDS, because he looked horrible. If you see some of those interviews before he died, he did an interview for the game Fight Night Champions. It's called Still Standing. He looked awful. He's bald. He just sounds... He did few years in prison. He had a rough life, a rough lifestyle. He had a few drunk driving incidents, did time for that. But yeah, then then died of his disease. He looked horrible at that time. Well, that's why you don't deny when you're sick. Why would anybody deny that they're sick? But this video is not about that. It's about paying tribute to a fighter that is often disrespected and underrated. Probably, maybe because of his race, but I'm not gonna make this a race thing. But he is a very good fighter that was plagued with a weak chin and a lack of stamina as well. So, oh, and one more thing, he was in line to he was in line even after his loss to Lennox Lewis. Don King set him in line for a 30 million fight deal, and for a 3-fight deal for $30 million, of which in that last fight he was gonna fight Mike Tyson. I could imagine that fight. That would have been a great fight, man. That would have been a really good fight. But yeah, it was for $38.5 million, and then he got AIDS. So AIDS ruins life. AIDS ruins lives, guys. It also ends lives. So think twice before calling Tommy Morrison a bum, because he's a very good fighter. And thanks for watching, everybody. What are some underrated fighters that you could think of that aren't appreciated or are disrespected a lot? And don't forget to rate this video and subscribe. Oh, rest in peace, Tommy Morrison. Peace.